Hi guys, and welcome back to the higher level chess course. I'm going to dive straight in today. I'm going to show you what we were looking at the end of last lesson. I'm going to share my screen currently. This was a game that I played in the Surrey League a couple of years ago. And I think it's particularly relevant to what we were talking about in the last couple of lessons in terms of counter-attacking. Now, often, the guy I was playing was quite a strong player. And often the best way to defend sometimes against strong players is to counter-attack, and it's to to make sure that they've got things to worry about as well as you. So I'm going to show you what happened in this game. Now, I think as homework I asked you to come up with a plan that you could use to play in the situation. I'm going to reveal the move I played. I'm going to give you an alternative too. There was a move that I think I considered at the time, which was this. Something like this move, pawn to g6. I think I was a little bit worried, though, about the build-up of pieces on the h-file. So white could just transfer the rook across, maybe the queen as well, and notice that I think black would find himself under a lot of pressure. So I thought, how about if I try something a bit more active? I tried this move, pawn to b4. Now it looks as though that pawn is not defended enough times, but there's a nice little trick here. So after b4, and my opponent did swap, well, I guess this move here is somewhat dubious, I think. It's a little bit, well, it's not the best, because notice that now that c-file will be open, something like this. The c-file will be open. I can swing the rook down to here or to here. If I go here, okay, it's not quite checkmate because white can reroute the rook there. But notice then that the second rook could come down, and well, white would be certainly losing this pawn. I would say maybe more than that. So after this move, black would probably come down to this square, and white would find himself in a bit of trouble in terms of staying in control of that pawn and maybe the pawn that he takes here. So as a result, white did not take this pawn. He decided not to, and instead decided to press ahead with his own plan, rook across. Now this is a difficult situation because at the moment, a move such as this, I think, would not quite work for black. Now let's see what would happen. It looks as though I'm fighting off the attack very well, but the issue is the white can play a certain move. See if you can work out what that move would be. If you need to set this up, by the way, on a board, then please do. But I would say a move such as this would be good enough to win the game, because I don't think that after this move, I think this is going to be very difficult for black to defend, and I think at least black will at least lose the queen. Notice the queen is cutting off black's king, but also there's a threat of checkmate down here. So I think therefore black would have to move this pawn. The threat comes anyway. And I just feel like with the rook coming down here, that's going to be really very serious. It's going to be very difficult for black to get out of this alive. So it's not something I really wanted to go into. I didn't want to allow that to happen. So I'm just going to undo those moves. So instead of that move, much better to try a counterattack. Now this, I would say this move, the first move perhaps is a little easier to see, but then the continuation maybe not quite so easy. So see if you can spot my plan in this position. What would you play here as black? Okay, notice that white has quite a weak king comparatively, and we both do, to be fair, although it looks like we've got this row of pawns in front of us. Both kings are under attack to some extent, which means, well, this king here is far from black's pieces, but the weakness is along the back rank. Therefore, the move queen to a7 is probably, I think, black's best move. Because notice we're now threatening, well, checkmate in 2. And if white obviously goes for his idea, then we can just checkmate him. So that won't work. This is called defending by counter-attacking. Okay, this is a much more effective way of dealing with a threat. So after queen a7, the way that white deals with this is by moving a pawn. So he moves his pawn up to g4 here. Now again, the threat is still in operation. I don't really want, well, I definitely don't want white coming down here to take my pawn. And again, this move pawn to h6, well, it's even more dangerous now because maybe, well, apart from the sacrifice, white can also use that pawn to lever this h6 pawn out the way as well. So this is, again, not something I want to do. I have to keep the pressure on. I can't leave white to his own devices, otherwise I'll be in trouble, basically. So, excuse me, the move is queen to a1. Queen to a1 is, again, a check, forces white to move the king. So the king comes here, that's the only move. And here is a move I really remember. So even though I've played a lot of games in the Surrey League, this is a move that kind of sticks in my mind. Fairly unique idea. What would you do in this situation? Bearing in mind that white has got this dangerous threat on the against the pawn, what would you play here? Well, seeing as I can't really attack white's king anymore, and I can't really get to it, this kind of thing would be too slow, because again, checkmate is coming. So the move is queen to b1. I'm defending this pawn here diagonally backwards. Now, I think white would probably be best advised to, I guess, arguably to take this pawn, maybe, or just to press on with this pawn. It'd be interesting to see. You might want to check this out on the computer, see what the computer says. But I think the decision that white made here was an interesting one. He went for rook takes pawn, so he gets 1 point. He loses 5. He gains 9, so that's now 10, and he loses 5 again. So we've both got 10 points out of that. It's now a queen against 2 rooks. I'm going to show you the conclusion of this game just very quickly. We're not going to analyze this as such. I'm going to show you what happened because it ended in a draw. Although, you know, the queen, you might think, well, the queen surely is going to be a key part of this game. But actually, the 2 rooks working together are very powerful. And you'll notice that actually I'm the one trying to win this game in the end. So white decides to get rid of this threat because obviously I was threatening to take on c3. So we have a move such as this. I could perhaps have come up here. That would have been okay. I decided to use my rooks I suppose in a more, I don't know, perhaps a slightly more defensive way. I wasn't risking, you know, getting into any forks along this diagonal, anything like that. So rook to b6, h4, and then, okay, rook to c4. So I'm threatening to take that pawn now, and also I'm attacking a second pawn. So after h5, well, he's coming to attack me, but I've got to try to, again, attack by counter-attacking. I can't just like move my king back because that will waste time. It's much better to attack using, basically to defend by attacking, if you see what I mean. So again, I'll just rattle through the last few moves just so you can see what happened in the end. So there's no way that black can defend this pawn, so he presses on with his own attack. Again, very important. Rook takes pawn. So then notice that we have an opportunity to do a threefold repetition. So because now black is a pawn down, I believe, so we've got 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 against 10, that's 14 in total. So yeah, white is a pawn down. He decides, well, better to bail out with a threefold repetition. So notice if I block this, then that walks straight into a pin, which is no good at all. That would lose the game, I think, instantly. And well, I can't do this move because we have en passant. That would be also bad because I would be in trouble here from this pawn. So I can't play f5 either. The move g6 I considered, I think, but again, I don't think that necessarily that my king is that safe after this sequence of moves. So it's I think it would probably have ended in a draw in any case, either by some kind of checking pattern. So what I allowed was just this situation where the queen came down, and there were several repetitions like this. Okay, so that's again another example of defending by means of a counterattack. So hopefully that was interesting. I'll just quickly repeat the sequence here. So it was b4, this move b4. Then it was transferring the queen round the back, and then finally defending backwards. So that's a much more active queen from that position. Okay, I'm going to go on to a game now, just very quickly, and we'll continue this next lesson as well. But it's a game between, again, this chap called Petrosian, Tigran Petrosian, who was world champion in the 60s, and one of his nemesis, who was, I think he was Hungarian, this guy called Lajos Portis. Portis, again, a very strong grandmaster. This game was, it was in what's called the Candidates Tournament. So Candidates Tournament is it's a special tournament to decide the challenger for the World Championship. So the person who would challenge the world champion in a kind of match. This is the quarterfinal of the Candidates Tournament, okay, 1974. I like this game, and as I say, we'll go through it a little bit more in detail next lesson. It's white to move in this position. First of all, we need to count material. So I think we'll do that together because you guys are high level. So rook against rook, knight against knight, and then let's just count the pawns. Well, you might notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, it means that black is a pawn ahead. White needs to play actively in this situation. He can't afford to sit around and do nothing because ultimately he's a pawn down. He has to try to change the course of the game. So the way that we can do this is by exploiting or taking advantage of a piece which is perhaps not that well placed. What would you say is black's worst piece, or the one that has not really got that many squares to go to? Have a think. I would say this knight is not particularly well placed. So what we can do is we can chase it away. So if the knight came in here, well, that would be not so good because notice that we can trap the knight. In fact, the knight is already trapped. We can make sure of that by going rook to c2, then pushing up that pawn and winning the knight. So that would be a disaster for black. So black cannot afford to do the move knight to a2. So instead they go back to a6. But that is also not a great place for the knight because notice it only has one space. It can only go back there. It can't go across or even forward. The value of that knight is reduced because it's at the side of the board. So even though white is a pawn behind here, the fact that this knight is struggling to get back into the game is a positive for white. It means that the position is probably roughly equal, okay? Notice also that white has a more active rook. If the rook can come up to that square, then it can attack the weak pawn at the back here. So you might have thought, well, why not do that straight away? But you'll see why in a second. So Petrosian goes pawn to b4, okay? And the idea again is to chase the knight away. And there's not really much black can do about this. If black decides to perhaps cover that square by means of rook to d7, well, then we can just swing around the back. So this is still not what black wants. And again, the knight comes in here, and eventually that pawn is going to fall, I would imagine. So Petrosian doesn't panic in this situation. He realizes that, okay, he's a pawn down, white's a pawn down, but because of this knight and the weak pawn, he considers his position to be maybe even a tiny bit better. So let's just see what happens. Portish goes like this to try to reactivate the knight, just to get the knight into the game. Perhaps something like this. That's maybe like a 3-move idea to come and attack the white king. I'm just going to show you a couple more moves, then we can continue next week. I want to pause here and see if you can work out a way to progress in this game. What move would you play here to put black under pressure? I think white has a logical move here. It's this move, rook to c7. Because ultimately, okay, well, if black decides to defend the pawn using his rook, an x-ray defense, then we have this nice little fork. So we would win the knight there. Obviously, black can't move that back. It would be undefended. So we would win this knight. So that won't work. It means that black has to play this move. Okay. Now, the question is, should we take this pawn, or should we try something else? Well, this weakness here is a big problem for black. So I'm going to set this as kind of a homework task. In fact, no, I think I'm going to set the next move as a homework. We're going to go like this. First of all, we're going to fix this black pawn in position. Okay. Black has to defend it, and now this is going to be your homework. So set this position up on the board and consider what you would play now as white. We've kind of reached a position where we want to try to make progress with other pieces. Our rook is in a perfect position. So what would you play next? So that's your homework for next time. I'm going to unshare now. Again, I hope that was beneficial to you. The value of playing actively is very high. Even if we're a pawn down, like in that second example, or if we're under pressure, like in that game I showed you earlier on, it's much better to play with a sword in your hand, to play fighting chess instead of just defending. So again, this is a bit of a continuation of what I was talking about last lesson, but hopefully that's given you a couple more examples of the importance of playing actively. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. And again, just send me an email if you've got any questions, and otherwise I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.